A young black man is wrongfully imprisoned by a powerful white racist judge. 15 years later, the truth comes out. They say justice is blind, but for Marcus, one mistake cost him 15 years of his life. A young black man punished for a crime he didn't commit, all because of a decision made by a powerful judge. But what was it that led to his wrongful conviction? Marcus had always been the kind of man people admired in his small town. He was hardworking, respectful, and had dreams of starting his own business someday. Growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were limited, especially for someone like him, Marcus knew that if he wanted to succeed, he would have to work twice as hard. His parents had instilled these values in him, and he carried them with pride. He worked 2 jobs, one at a local diner and another as a janitor at the school, saving every penny for his future. But the town Marcus lived in wasn't kind to men like him. It was a place ruled by Judge Randall, a man with an iron fist and a deep-seated prejudice that influenced every decision he made from the bench. For years, people had whispered about the unfair rulings that came from his courtroom, especially when it involved young black men. Those whispers became louder when Marcus's life was about to take a tragic turn. One evening, after a long shift at the diner, Marcus was walking home as usual. The streets were quiet, the sky darkening as the sun set behind the buildings. Marcus liked these moments of peace, where he could think about his future and the life he was working so hard to build. Little did he know that his life was about to be shattered in an instant. Across town, a robbery had just taken place at a local convenience store. The thief had broken in, stolen money from the register, and left the store in disarray. The store clerk, still shaken from the encounter, could only give a vague description of the suspect, a tall black man in his 20s. The police, eager to solve the crime quickly, began scouring the streets for anyone who fit that description. As fate would have it, Marcus happened to be walking home, minding his own business, when a patrol car pulled up beside him. The officers jumped out, aggressive from the start. "Hey, you there, stop!" one of them barked. Marcus turned, surprised by the sudden commotion. He raised his hand slightly, confused but compliant. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice steady but concerned. "We've had a robbery," the officer said, narrowing his eyes. "You match the description of the suspect." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had just finished his shift at the diner. He hadn't even been near the store. But the way the officers looked at him made it clear they weren't interested in his side of the story. Before Marcus could explain himself, the officers grabbed him, searching his pockets roughly. They didn't find anything incriminating, but that didn't stop them from cuffing him right there on the street. Panic set in as they shoved him into the back of the patrol car, his protests ignored. "I didn't do anything," Marcus said, trying to stay calm. "I just got off work. You can ask my boss." But it didn't matter. The officers had already decided he was guilty. They took him to the police station, booked him, and locked him in a cell, all without giving him a chance to explain. The next few days were a blur for Marcus. His family came to see him, their faces etched with worry and disbelief. They knew Marcus wasn't capable of such a crime, but in this town their words held little weight. The police were confident they had their man, and the media quickly picked up the story, painting Marcus as a dangerous criminal. The trial came quickly, too quickly for Marcus and his family to prepare. His court-appointed lawyer didn't seem to care much about the case. He barely spoke to Marcus before the trial, and when he did, it was clear he wasn't interested in proving Marcus's innocence. He just wanted to get through the trial as quickly as possible. The day of the trial, Marcus sat in the courtroom, his hands trembling as he waited for his turn to speak. Judge Randall sat at the front, his cold eyes surveying the room. Marcus had heard about the judge's reputation. Everyone had. He was known for his harsh sentences, especially when it came to young black men. And now, Marcus was the one sitting in front of him, facing a crime he didn't commit. The prosecution laid out their case, presenting the vague description from the store clerk as their main piece of evidence. They claimed Marcus had been seen near the store shortly after the robbery, though no one could prove he was actually inside. The store clerk was hesitant on the stand. admitting that the man who robbed him had been wearing a mask and that he couldn't be sure if it was Marcus or not. But the damage had already been done. The jury saw Marcus sitting there, a young black man, and that was enough for most of them. Marcus's lawyer barely put up a fight. He asked a few questions, called a witness or two, but it was clear that his heart wasn't in it. He didn't care about getting Marcus off the hook. He just wanted to close the case and move on. Marcus's family sat in the back of the courtroom, their faces full of fear. His mother, an elderly woman with kind eyes, wiped away tears as she watched her son's life unravel in front of her. She knew the system wasn't fair, but she had hoped, prayed, that Marcus would somehow escape the fate that had befallen so many before him. But when Judge Randall spoke, her hopes were crushed. Judge Randall looked down at Marcus, his face expressionless as he delivered the verdict. Marcus Jones, based on the evidence presented, I find you guilty of robbery and assault, he said, his voice cold and final. Marcus felt his heart drop. He hadn't expected much from the trial, but hearing the words come from the judge's mouth made it all too real. You are hereby sentenced to 15 years in state prison, Judge Randall continued, slamming his gavel down with a resounding thud. The courtroom erupted. Marcus's mother screamed from the back, begging the judge to reconsider, but it was no use. Marcus was led away in shackles, his life as he knew it over. The town moved on quickly, satisfied that justice had been served. But Marcus knew better. He knew that justice had nothing to do with what had happened to him. Prison was a nightmare. The days blurred together in a haze of cold steel and concrete. Marcus quickly learned that life behind bars was about survival. He kept his head down, avoided trouble when he could, and focused on staying alive. But the weight of his wrongful conviction weighed heavily on him. Every day, he replayed the trial in his mind, wondering what he could have done differently. He thought about his family, the life he had lost, and the future that had been stolen from him. 15 years passed slowly, each day more grueling than the last. Marcus grew older, his once youthful optimism replaced by a hardened resilience. He had learned to survive, but he had never given up hope that one day someone would see the truth. That day finally came when a young lawyer named Sarah stumbled across Marcus's case. Sarah had recently graduated from law school and was working on a project that involved reviewing old case files. When she read through Marcus's file, something didn't sit right with her. The evidence was flimsy at best, and there were glaring inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. Witnesses who could have testified on Marcus's behalf had never been called to the stand. The police investigation had been sloppy, and there was no physical evidence linking Marcus to the crime. It was clear to Sarah that Marcus had been wrongfully convicted. Determined to get to the bottom of the case, Sarah reached out to Marcus's family. She sat down with his mother, who had never given up hope that her son would one day come home. I believe Marcus is innocent, Sarah said, her voice filled with conviction. I'm going to do everything I can to bring him home. Marcus's mother broke down in tears, clutching Sarah's hands as she thanked her. She had been waiting for this moment for 15 long years. Sarah worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. She tracked down the original witnesses, many of whom had been too scared to speak out during the trial. One by one, they began to open up, revealing the pressure they had been under to stay silent. Sarah also found new evidence that had never been presented in court, evidence that proved Marcus had been nowhere near the scene of the crime on the night of the robbery. With this new information in hand, Sarah filed for a retrial. The case was brought back to court, and this time, the truth came out. Witnesses who had been silenced finally spoke up. The new evidence was irrefutable. Marcus had been wrongfully convicted. The day of the retrial, the courtroom was packed. The town, once so sure of Marcus's guilt, now sat in stunned silence as the truth was revealed. Even Judge Randall, now an older man with a fading reputation, couldn't stop the truth from surfacing. As the evidence was presented, Marcus sat in the courtroom, his heart pounding. He had waited 15 years for this moment, and now it was finally happening. The judge overseeing the retrial declared Marcus innocent. The gavel came down once more, but this time it was a victory. Marcus was free. He walked out of the courthouse, a free man, greeted by his family. Tears of joy streamed down their faces as they embraced him. Marcus had lost 15 years of his life, but he had finally regained his freedom. But Marcus didn't stop there. He wasn't content with just being free. He wanted justice, not just for himself, but for others who had been wrongfully convicted. He began working with Sarah and other lawyers, fighting to change the system that had failed him. In a final act of closure, Marcus confronted Judge Randall. The two stood face to face, the once powerful judge now a shadow of his former self. "You took 15 years from me," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But you won't take any more." Judge Randall looked down, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. He knew the truth now, and there was nothing he could say to make up for the injustice he had caused. Marcus walked away from that confrontation, not with anger, but with a sense of peace. He had survived the darkest years of his life, and now he was ready to help others do the same. His story, once a tragedy, had become a symbol of hope and redemption. Sometimes justice takes years. Sometimes the truth is buried deep beneath lies and prejudice. But for Marcus, the truth had finally come out, and with it came the freedom he had always deserved.